Hello everyone, you're welcome to this video, and this is actually like a run through correction of all what you guys have been doing so far as your labs. I've actually reviewed your code, and I've seen that most of you are actually trying. You're writing better code, while some of you are writing code that cannot be reusable. The first thing you need to understand is that in every company that you would ever work in, the only one thing they want to see from you is you being writing or you being able to write code that is usable. Usable simply means that they can read, they can understand, they can maintain, and they can reuse it without any problem. So the first thing will be with respect to installation of React.js. When you want to install React, avoid going to the React library directly, like to the react.js.org library, because this particular one here gives you a lot of problems when you're trying to configure things and set things up, because it actually runs on npx, and npx is a little bit complex with respect to just using your npm commands, because you can easily install npm dependencies without any problem. So that's a major problem. So the first thing you want to do is to come over to this website, vite.dev. In vite.dev, you can go to the document, the docs or the documentation, and in the documentation just go down. You're going to see, because it actually supports templates for presenting multiple view, both TypeScript and vanilla JavaScript. So that's the first thing. So we have vanilla, you have vanilla TypeScript, we have view TypeScript, we have React TypeScript, you have pre-React, we have lit, we have civlet, and we have solid, and also have weak. So those are the templates you can actually do. So the first thing you want to do is to be able to create your Vite latest. So just copying this command and running on your terminal will be able to create your Vite latest, which means if I was about to install, for instance, you're already in a repository here, I can actually run the npm create Vite latest or something, and then I put it inside of a folder. So in an example here, let me just close all the folders I have open so I can create a new folder here. So new folder, let's just call this React test or React stroke test. And in our React stroke test, I just want to come over here, cd, and I go out slash and I enter React stroke test, and then we are into React stroke test. Now I want to run npm create Vite app latest. So that's the first you want to run. If you cannot type the command or you are not so sure of typing the command, just come to this Vite documentation and copy the command from here and you run it. So just copy it from here and you run it without you being the one to actually type the command out. So once the command now run and it is done, the next thing you want to do now is that you want to run npm install to install the React dependencies. You choose what you're trying to install, which is actually from the creating the Vite. And then, for instance, we're working with React JSX, because when you install via the React library, which is the react.org, the first thing you discover is that you won't be able to actually run JSX. You cannot write JSX, and JSX is the better format of writing React than to actually writing it in the JavaScript syntax. So in the JavaScript syntax, it's kind of like not that most prominent. But when you're writing in JSX, which is what Vite gives us the possibility, like your file should end in the extension .jsx. JSX is more better to kind of write React on, and it is also very awesome when you want to use to kind of interpret and do things a little bit faster. So that is it about your running. So I'll just kind of leave a guide for you guys to see how to run the installation so that I can proceed, because my network is literally disturbing. Now just stop the installation and I'll go back to cd // and I'll go back to code with crest to this particular folder here, and I'll run npm start, or even running npm start. Let me just go outside of the repository. Let me go outside of the folder. So say cd .. and I do code with crest to open it. Like I just want to have a window for it so that we don't see all of these messy files that I have all through the projects I've been working on. So now when it opens, so this is it opening, I can just minimize this one so we have just this open. And once we have just this open, this tutorial will kind of be a little bit long, but you need to kind of stick through it to understand most of the tips I'm going to be sharing here. Because I'm going to be sharing inbuilt kind of technical knowledge that you guys need to know to follow through. So I'll just open my terminal, open new terminal. And once the new terminal is open, okay, terminal. All right, so the code is open in the terminal. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to run npm run dev. So I'll just type npm run dev so that we can run the development environment and we see actually what we have as kind of this. So this is just an installation for React with Vite. As you can see here, it's specified here that this is Vite, and we're running the development environment for that Vite, and this is it running on localhost 5073, the port 5073. So all I need to do is simply to open this. If I come here, I think I have that already somewhere. I have this. So if I just come here, I think it should be here, this other browser. All right, so this is what we have, or where we have it running. Let me minimize this one, then I open it. So this is just a demo installation for React that we have showing here. So we are just going to be working on this. So this is just a basic. It says React in accordance with Vite, as you can see here. React plus Vite count. It can count from up to down. Click Vite plus React logo to learn more. Anyone. So that is it. So the first thing I'm going to be showing you guys here first was the lab that spoke about you guys kind of creating components, and I'm going to show you how you can create components, and you can create from smaller components to kind of large components, which is what I've actually done in multiple applications that I'm currently building and those I've built. If you go to something like ChopperStab, you see that there are things like buttons that remain consistent, cards, product view, and everything. We have most of those things. Even pages, we can create views. But in advanced React, I'm going to show you guys how to create specific views such that you have one large view that governs or manages your entire application. So let's now see. Now the first thing I want to do here is I just want to minimize this down, and I will explain the folders or the files that we have here for those of you who never knew it. The Vite config.js file simply has the Vite configurations, which imports the defined config from Vite, and then it does some other thing and exporting the plugins. And the plugin here we have is React. The package.json simply have all the packages that are installed. So if I install any package here, you are going to see them under dependencies. And the dependencies can be divided into the development dependencies and the ones that are kind of currently built. Then we have the scripts and everything. Next we have is a package log.json. This one you can always ignore it. It's a very big package that also have other dependencies that are being installed. And that is same for the others. So if I go to the index.html, this is the page where your entire application is being rendered. So when your application is running, it is being rendered in this particular index page. And this index page is very, very, very prominent for React, because they're just the root directories. This one here, which is this div, this is where everything is being rendered. I'm going to show you guys in further how it is being done. Then if I go to the src will contain the React file. So the first one we have is the main.jsx. The main.jsx is the one that points directly to the index.html. So as you can see here, it imports the strict mode and the create root. It imports the index.css, which we are going to unlink later on. Import app.js, and then here it renders the app file. So this app.jsx is what is being rendered here as the app here. And you can see here it says document.getElement by id root. So this id root, if I come back here to the index.html, you're going to see that this div id is root. So that's simply that root kind of stuff. Then I'll have the app.jsx that simply returns all what we saw there. So if I remove, for instance, if I do Control A here and I remove, then I run rfc react functional component export. So that's just a shortcut of kind of building React. So, and this says app. If I come back to this, you're going to see that this returns just app here. Now, one thing I want to do here is I just want to come and unlink the the index.css from here, or let me see in the app component if there's any CSS file. So if I come here to the index.css, and in the index.css, I just want to clear everything in here and I save. Then I come here, you are going to see what is being rendered, which is in this other browser here. So we simply have app. So this simply means our application is rendering something here. Now I'll just kind of give some basic styles so that we can work on something. You see it being centralized in the middle, because our goal here is to be able to create components, and I'll show you something which will be one of your tasks of what you guys are going to be doing. So in here, I'll just kind of call the body, and in the body here, I'll give the width. We'll give the width of 100%. We'll give the height 100 VH. They'll say display should be flex. We align items to the center, and then we justify content to the center. Alright, we save such that we can have the elements kind of centralized like this, so the app is at the center. So what we are going to do here is simple. I just want to show you people how you could create your component, because in the exercises I've been giving you guys in React, we have been creating just a one-page website, which means you could literally create it in your app.js file or app.jsx file, which means now from now henceforth I'm going to be giving you tutorial or labs like the lab for today that you guys are going to see. I'm going to give you a lab that requires that you have to create routes like the login, the registration route, the homepage route, the dashboard route, and others. Because at the end of this your internship, you should be able to kind of create a full application or full front-end application in React, which is what we are going to be working on. Because I will give you guys the information and everything that you guys are supposed to be working on, and you are going to create components and other things. All right. So let's proceed. So if I want to create components, the first thing is that in my src folder, I have to create a folder here called components, and this particular folder called components will kind of save all the components in our project. So in this folder called components, the next thing I want to do is I want to create a component. So in this component here, let me just call this component the button. It starts with capital B. So button.jsx. So we call it button.jsx, and the button.jsx is simply a component that has a button. And this particular button here, we don't want to be able to be creating buttons and restyling the buttons. So we want to be able to create a button as a component, and we can reuse that particular component anywhere in our application. Just like you're creating a navigation bar, and then you can reuse that particular navigation bar anywhere else. It's just the same. I will also create a navigation bar component. So just the basic explanation of how this component will work will be simple. So in here, we are going to create a button component. I'll just use a shortcut for React functional component export, and I'll press enter to create it. So this is the button. So instead of rendering a button, I'm going to render actually a button. So I'll render a button, and we create a button. And in this button here, you want to pass in a specific value. So this button takes a value. So you want to pass in a value, and this particular value here will be equals to value. And in the button here, the button has to kind of accept properties. So what we are passing in this here is simply what we call a props. Props are simply like like you want to pass in parameters, like a function. You are passing in parameters that you want to reuse the parameters later on. So I'm passing in value as a parameter, and this button here kind of, let me not say returning the value in here, so we can simply pass in the value inside. So this button kind of takes the value. So the value of the button here, or we could still call it the name or something, or the value or something, could actually take this name. And in this button here, if you want to be able to style this button, we could give this button a class name. Now in CSS we just give class, but in React we give class name, and we follow the camel casing, which means the next word that is inside of it must begin with a capital letter. So I will give class name btn, and if the class name is btn, if I come to my app.js, one thing I always advise you to do is that in your components folder, you can always create the component, like the components folder, and you create maybe the component style, or maybe they say the components folder, you can create the css. So for the component, you have the css files inside of it. So what I could basically do here is simple. I could create another file inside here called, they say, button.jsx, or sorry, button.css, something like this. And when we have button.css, I can simply call the .btn, which is a class, and in this .btn here, I want to give it a background color of red, for instance, and I save. Just to be sure that it's actually working, the first thing I want to do here is to be able to import. So I want to import, and I'm importing just the css file. So I want to import the dot slash, and what are we kind of importing here? Button dot what, css. So that's what we are importing, and I will kind of close with a semicolon. So this is it, button.css. Now the next thing I want to do is to be able to call this particular file. Let me come back here and I save this. Then I come here to the app.js. Now how do we actually reuse a button in our app.jsx? So if you want to be able to reuse that particular button in our app.jsx, the first thing we want to do is that inside of our app.jsx, for instance, we want to be able to first of all import it. But there are some tricks you like React actually use by default to be able to kind of import stuff. So you just try to kind of like add the button component, like button, like this. Then you see this, so you just click, it automatically imports. But if that doesn't work, you need to be able to type this import, and then you specify like the button from this, and the word you're passing here should be the same as this particular name you pass to the function that you are creating. Most often you could create an arrow function, so any type of function, but it so totally depends on how you actually want your naming convention to look like. So if I save and I come here, you see we have a button in here. So the button is actually small because we have not styled the button where we did not pass the value. So this button takes a value, and the value we want to simply pass to this button here, we could simply say let's just say log in, for instance. So the button takes a value, we call the value login. If you come here now, you can see that the value is written there. So that's an example of a button that takes in properties. Now an element could take several properties, which depends on how it could manipulate those properties. I think on a basic knowledge you might not really understand what we have actually done, but this is actually something that is kind of really fancy enough that you have to understand. Because with time, when you start working with React, working with different components, you understand how to pass different data to specific components. Now, I never wanted this video to be very long. Now, let's go back to an example of creating a navigation component. So in here, in our components, I want to create navigation, or let me say navigation.jsx. This is our navigation.jsx. In here, I just want to create React Native or React functional component export like this. And in here, we have navigation. Now, instead of passing navigation here, I want to pass h1, for instance. And this h1 simply says, let's say code with, let's say crest, something like this. Then next to this, now we want to create a div, and we want to call this div like it's a nav element. So it's a nav stroke el, and this nav stroke el, sorry about that, not in caps. So I want to call it nav stroke el, and this now stroke el here. We actually want to be able to pass in our navigation element. And now there's one thing, since it's a navigation element, normally in HTML we can use the anchor tag, like this anchor tag here, a like this, and we add href like this, equals to maybe home or something, and then in here we pass in the home. But what we are going to discover here in that in React, we can still use this normally. So we can use this, and for us to see this first, let me save and I come to our app.jsx here, and I try to call the navigation here. So I can call the navigation, here is it here, and it imports the navigation, and I save. Now if I come here, I want to just show you. So we have the home. Now what this happens is simple. So it simply returns the same page, which is /home, because it's the default route or route of the application. Now it simply returns this, but there is one thing you see, it kind of refreshes the page. And in React, one thing that we actually like from React, or reasons why we use React, is simply because React can actually operate without refreshing your page, which means you can leave from one page to another without you seeing that particular page, like refreshing. It happens in multiple websites. So if I don't want to open because my network is not literally going through, but if you go to maybe chopasapp.com and you try to leave from one page to another, you discover that the URL does not refresh. It's like in PHP. That's the advantage to React. So when you use the anchor tag, it actually refreshes. So how now can you actually use something that does not refresh the page? That's where we have the link tag. So for the link tag, we simply use this link keyword, and this link keyword here simply first have to import React from kind of let me come. So you need to use a link, and this link here is simply another way of writing an anchor tag in React. So you simply use the link. So with this link here, you can simply link elements like this, and when you're using the link tag, you need to import the link. You have to import link from React router. Now we have not actually installed React router yet, but normally we are supposed to use link. Anyways, I'm going to show you guys how to import React router to create route, because your task from now henceforth is simply you guys using the React router to actually create routes, because we need to kind of, so I'll just undo this and I get back to this. So we are just going to use this for now. It refreshes, but we are not moving from any page to another. All I need to do now is to duplicate this. So I want to duplicate this, so we duplicate. Oh, sorry about that. Oof. All right. All right, let me not duplicate this, and I change this to about. Contacts. Then this to services. All right, when we're done with this, we save, and then we want to create a call to action. Now, let's see how we can actually use our components. So this is our navigation element. We want to create the login, like to prompt the user to either register or log in. So what we simply do, I could have two buttons, like a primary and a secondary button component, like the buttons we created. So here, I will just call the button component, for instance. And in this button component here, I'll pass in the value, which is the property we are passing. And this value here will simply be equals to, let's say, register, something like this, and I save. So if we come back here, or not here. So if I come back here, I should now be able to see that that particular component has been updated with the button that says login, I think. Okay, it was still refreshing. Why is nothing appearing again? Okay. All right, so the issue was coming from this button component we are trying to import. Actually, I don't know where this import is coming from. So let's try to import back our button again. So I'll just delete this and I'll call button. So we call button, and this is the one we are importing, not the first one. And we want to pass in the value to be equals to, open our parameters, and here is to be maybe register. And then now we need to close our component and we save. I think that solves the problem that we were facing. Okay, so this is what we have. So we can just now maybe just style it. So we just go to our, maybe let me just style in the button of CSS, for instance. So in here I'll have to go back to this. I'll open it here, then I'll open this navigation so that we can style and see. So this div here, I'll just give it a class name and I'll call it nav. So I want to style the nav. So in here I want to style .nav, and our .nav here should have a width of 100%, for instance. We should have maybe a height, let's say, of about 100 pixels. Then now we have display or flex. We have justify content, space between, align items to the center. Then now we can have, now the flex action is already okay. Now for the width, let me just reduce the width so that we can take like 80% of the width. Then if I save and I come here, which is not this, and I come here and I close this and I come back to our codes and I save this and I come back. Okay, we have something like this. Now the first thing that comes is in our app.js, we have this div which is not closed. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create fragments. React fragments will be more better to wrap our code in them, because they are going to kind of remove the default styles. Like a div will be taking its own kind of funny styles, but React fragments, I think it does not take that into consideration. And I also have to style the root. So we take hashtag root, and I just want to give the root a width of 100%. And I save. Okay, I hope that solves the problem. All right, so this is what we have, and there's something I just want to add to that particular root here. I paste this, then I change this to center. And I save. Okay, so this is an example of what we have, and I can just give heights. All right, then now I need to go back to the app, which is this, and I remove this button, so we will just be left with the navigation. So this is it. So this is an example here. We have a navigation, I might just want to add more styles to this guy here, which is this. Now, be mindful, what I'm doing here does not simply necessarily mean I'm trying to make it perfect. It's just showing you how to create components and reuse those components. So in here, maybe I could just separate them by giving a width of, let's say, 40%. And then I can just give display flex, which is this. Control Z. I just give this. Okay. And I think that solves the problem. So we have something like this. So this is just an example to show how we could literally kind of create a component. Now let's see how we could actually create or to add the React router. Router simply means you have multiple pages and you can visit a specific route, for instance, .log/login/register/this/that. That's basically where your task will be. And from now henceforth, you're going to be working on one particular lab, which is you already know what you'll be working on from now till the end. So I don't need to come and send labs again. You know what you're going to be working on. So in this, we are going to be seeing. So for us to use routing, we have to install what we call the React Router DOM. The React Router DOM kind of controls how we kind of move from one place to another. And what we're going to do here is, first, I'll have to close my terminal. Control C closes the terminal. And I want to now kind of run npm install react stroke router stroke DOM. Enter. This kind of can take a while to install, so I just pause the video and play when it is done installing. Alright, so it is done installing, so we are just going to test it out to see how it works. So I'll just run npm run def again, npm run def, so that it restarts back our development server. And now we want to be able to see. Now the next thing we want to do is we will have to go to our main.jsx. I'll move it here. So in our main.jsx, we literally want to kind of change the configuration that we have here, so that we can include a configuration that would be able to use our React router that we are just from installing. But just to verify React router, if I go to package.json, you are going to see that we have installed the React router DOM. So that is the router that we are using. Remember, I told you that all the dependencies that you install will be found under dependencies. So if I can come back to the main.jsx, that is where we need to configure our React router. So the first thing that we need to do here is we need to be able to import our create browser router, since we are going to be using mostly the browser router. So I import import, and in here I want to import the create browser router from React DOM, and we have to use this particular browser router in our application because we have created this. Now we just copy this and then we go down. Since you have created without using here, I'll simply create a const and I'll call it router, and this router will be equals to this create React router, and this create React router would be equals, or it would take in some, let me say, some objects. So these particular objects will be like the different how can I put it, it will just be like the different route that we have in our application. Now let's say, for instance, we want to create the first route. We can call this route, we can give it a path. So the path will be simply be this slash, and then we put a comma, and I want to create the element. So create the element, and this element here will simply be the route, like not like the route, the JSX file that we want to render. So here I'll be rendering the app. So I'll be rendering the app.jsx. Sorry about that. So I'll be rendering the app.jsx. So when you follow this, you're actually going to go to the route. But the last thing we want to do is, in here we are rendering the app.jsx, but now we want to change this to render instead the router provider, so that depending on the router provider or the value of the router, it will be able to route us that particular route. So say router, or let me spell it. So I want to go to the router provider, which is this, And in our router provider, I want to specify the route. And or the router, which will simply be equals to the router. So will be equals to the router. Let me just put it inside of this, and then now we need to be able to close this like this. So this is what we have. So an example here, we are going to see how we could actually check this out if it's actually working. So I'll just open our application back. We have code with Crest, and I'll put /hello for instance, and I'll enter. You're going to see it would my return a 404 page error showing that that particular page is not found. Why? Because it is not specified in the router. But if we create this particular hello page, we'll now be able to see the hello page in our React router, because now it exists as a specific router object. So you see here on expected application hello, it means that particular route cannot be seen. Now if we come over here where we have components in our src, let's say we create pages folder. So we just call this not this, we call it pages. And our pages here, we create that file called the hello.jsx, for instance. And our hello.jsx, we create React functional component export by default. Okay, and we just return hello. We just want a page that returns hello, or a specific page. Now that will reuse the component we created, and the component we created will simply be like that navigation component. So I just remove this to include just a React fragment. So in here, I want to call the navigation, which is navigation. So we want to include the navigation, and this is it, so that when it goes to the next page, we should simply see that this is the navigation now, and then we can print an h1 here. Okay, let's just print h1, and this h1 will simply say hello, this is the hello page, for instance. And we can also come over here to this other page, which is the app.js, and we call this the home page. So create h1 here so that we could see the differences between them. So we say hello, this is the home page, for instance, and we save. So if I go now to our main.jsx, I'm going to create the route for the hello. So in here, I will just kind of, when you want to duplicate, you can just duplicate this, or just put comma, and you create a new route. So this route here will have the path, and the path we are passing here will simply be the /hello. So whenever you go to /hello, you are going to visit the path comma, then we create the elements. So the element you're trying to target here will simply be, we want to call the hello, which is this, like this, and I save. So if I now come here to the application, which is this running with our /hello, now you're going to see that it takes us to this particular page that returns hello here. So hello, this is our hello page. Just to modify the styles, if I come back here to the nav, which is not the nav, the root, I will simply say flex direction column, and I save so that it can flex everything to the column. Now it takes us down, which is this, which is not proper. Okay, I think I understand why we have that. So justify content center, nav this. I think I started the body somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. I started the body somewhere. Now let's go to the the index.jsx. Here, okay, align item center. We don't want that, so that it does not push everything to the center. Okay, I made a mistake. Instead should be justify. That is out. Save, and we come here. Okay. What's on the CSS? Justify content center. Is this where the problem is coming from? I don't think so. Justify content should be center. Align item should be out, I think. Save. This should solve this. Same for the roots. The root should be the same. Justify content should be center. Alright, so we have something like this, but still up. Okay. So flex direction, column here. Alright, so we have this. So this is basically what I meant. So you see you have a component that is reused. If I go back to the home page like this, you're going to see it says hello. This is the home page, and if I go down to the /hello, you're going to see that it takes us to the hello page. Now, why is it refreshing? It's simply refreshing because I'm trying to access via the URL. So we can now create multiple pages like the login, the registration, the others, literally using the same React router, and it kind of like routes everything moving from one page to another, and like the login, register, and others. So you're going to use this React router method and creating components to actually work on the labs that proceeds from this particular lab. So in the lab, you guys are going to be literally working on a new design, which is actually a full-fledged e-commerce application. So let me just demo it here to show you guys what you have.